So let's talk about a show that on the surface was a massive hit. But if you dig a little deeper, you find what this analysis calls a fascinating creative failure. We are talking, of course, about Nickelodeon's Victorious, a show that was built from the ground up to be a star-making machine, and somehow ended up going completely sideways. Let's get into it. Back in the late 2000s, this was the billion-dollar question for teen TV. Disney had absolutely cracked the code. They were turning their sitcom actors into global music icons. But Nickelodeon, well, they were kind of playing catch-up. They had plenty of popular shows for sure, but they just weren't creating that next big musical superstar. And you can really see the difference in their game plans right here. Disney's blueprint? It was simple, and it was brilliant. Find a charismatic kid, build a whole show around their musical talent, and boom, launch their pop career. Nickelodeon, on the other hand, was trying to kind of bolt on music careers to their existing comedy stars, like from iCarly. The problem was, those shows just weren't about music. I mean, just look at how dominant Disney was. Year after year, they rolled out another hit that was basically a launchpad for a new star. You had Miley Cyrus, Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, the Jonas Brothers. These guys weren't just TV actors. They were everywhere. Disney had a full-blown star factory, and it was working overtime. So yeah, this was the huge challenge for Nickelodeon. They desperately needed their own Hannah Montana. They needed their own superstar-making machine, and they were going to have to build it from scratch. So what did they do? Well, they placed a massive bet. Instead of trying to make an old idea fit, they decided to create a brand new show, designed from day one for this one specific purpose. And on paper, the idea was perfect. It was called Victorious, a show set at a performing arts high school called Hollywood Arts, a place where, breaking out into song and dance was totally normal. And right at the center of it all was Victoria Justice, the star Nickelodeon was banking on to be their answer to Miley Cyrus. The whole thing was engineered for success. The show used a clever concept that our source calls fame bait. Just like iCarly, it was designed to make the audience dream about being famous. But iCarly was about internet fame. Victorious was selling a much bigger dream, becoming a real superstar. I mean, the theme song is basically telling you, hey, this could be you. But, even with this supposedly flawless plan, the cracks started to show. And fast. The great irony is that this show, built to launch a confident superstar, was itself deeply, deeply insecure. And this quote from the source material just nails it. From the very first episode, the show just wasn't confident in what it was supposed to be, and that insecurity led to some really, really weird creative choices. And a huge part of the problem, the characters themselves. Instead of giving us a supportive group of friends, the show was built on a foundation of meanness. The hero, Tori, was incredibly narcissistic. Her sister, Trina, was just there to be made fun of. And other characters like Kat were treated like punching bags. The source even points out how the puppet, Rex, was basically written as a problematic caricature. And Tori, the supposed hero, was a perfect example of this. The writers would constantly have her do these horrible things, like turning her sister's birthday into her own personal concert, or kissing her friend's boyfriend, but the show would never, ever call her out on it. She was always the good guy no matter how terribly she acted. The analysis makes this great point. It feels like the writers were trying to do that anti-sitcom humor, kind of like what you see in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but they totally missed the point. In shows like that, the joke is that the awful people lose. In Victorious, the mean people always win, which it just feels mean. And you can see this insecurity baked right into the plots. Take this one karaoke episode. First, we see Jade and Kat get up and perform this incredible song, really showing off the vocal chops of Elizabeth Gillies and Ariana Grande. It's amazing. But then, when it's Tori's turn to sing, she doesn't have to compete against them. Oh no, the show literally brings in two new characters who are terrible singers just so she can easily beat them. It's a rigged game, clearly set up to protect its star from being compared to her powerhouse castmates. And if you need one single piece of evidence that sums up all the show's problems, Exhibit A has to be the crossover special with iCarly. It was called iParty with Victorious, and wow, it put all of the show's strangest habits on full display. The whole special was just bizarre. The iCarly cast feels completely off, like they're in some weird fanfiction, and the humor was often really uncomfortable. The source points out a bunch of jokes that just cross the line. The entire vibe was just off. And according to this analysis, all of that weird, awful energy came from one place. Victorious didn't just join the world of iCarly, it infected it, dragging that much more grounded sitcom right down to its own strange level. So, you're probably thinking, how can you call a show with huge ratings a failure? Well, it's because it failed at its primary mission. It set out to do one very specific thing, and it just didn't. And here's the fundamental problem right here. The pilot episode promised us a show about a musical superstar in the making, but what do we actually get? A sitcom that was mostly about wacky stuff happening in an improv class. The big musical numbers were few and far between, and the argument is that this was because, well, it's just cheaper to film scenes in a classroom. At the end of the day, the show's entire reason for existing was to make Victoria Justice a massive pop star. But it was so terrified of her being outshined by her incredibly talented co-stars, like, Ariana Grande and Elizabeth Gillies, that it kept shooting its own mission in the foot. So its legacy is this really weird mixed bag. It's remembered for its mean-spirited humor and its constant creative insecurity. And in the ultimate twist of irony, the show that was built to launch Victoria Justice accidentally ended up being the launch pad for Ariana Grande, who was just supposed to be the quirky side character. So that leaves us with a really interesting question, right? Victorious was, without a doubt, a commercial success. But because it failed its main mission and created this tonally bizarre, creatively compromised show, can you also call it a failure? It really makes you think about what success actually means.